Okay, what are we talking about? Pretrial publicity. This can be a problem. Pretrial publicity. Of course, they're going to start that trial down in Albuquerque with the mother and the boyfriend and the boyfriend's aunt that murdered and chopped up the little girl and tried to burn her after they raped her. That trial is going to start. Now the question is that if you live in Santa Fe or Albuquerque, that's all that you've been hearing about. You've heard about this case over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Oh, something happened over the holiday. There was a missionary that was killed in the Indian Ocean. Not the Indian Ocean. Yeah, the Indian Ocean. It was an island off of India where a isolated group of individuals lived. And he was killed. He was killed by those natives, those indigenous peoples. He was told not to go there, and he went anyway. And this wasn't the first time he went, but this time they killed him. The natives killed him. The indigenous people of that island killed him. So why did he go?
He wanted to convert because he said that they were sadists or whatever. I don't know.
They needed to be saved.
Yeah, they needed to be saved, and he went against the law because they were protected. He wasn't allowed
Exactly.
to go that way.
And he did it anyway.
And now they're trying to put justice, trying to seek justice from that tribe. And I don't know.
Are they?
Yeah.
I thought they weren't. I thought they weren't going to do anything with him.
Well, I don't know, maybe it was on Facebook, but I don't know
Okay.
if it's true.
That's not what I heard, but that's okay.
Okay.
I mean, whatever you heard on Facebook, I'm sure it's... it might be or might not be true. Okay, so let's try this guy. So who's at fault here?
The missionary.
The missionary's at fault. Well, so you could be the prosecuting attorney. So who thinks he was not at fault? Anybody? He wasn't at fault? It wasn't his fault? Did he have to go? Isn't that what his religion told him he had to do? Is anybody a Christian? Nobody?
I was.
What, did they tell you that you had to proselytize? That you have to convert people? That's your job?
Yeah, I was in the Baptist.
There you go.
Strong Baptist church, and you had to be saved in order to talk to other people that weren't saved.
And they wanted you to save other people?
Yeah.
Sure. Wow, so you get to be the defense attorney too.
No, I'm okay. I'll be the.
Okay, you'll be the prosecuting attorney.
Yeah.
So was he at fault? Should we go on that island and try to find the guy that killed him?
No, they might kill us.
Is that why we're not going? Because they might kill us? Okay. So we're not going to...
So if you look at a religion...
So who is right and wrong?
If you look at the religion part of it, you probably have to forgive the people. But if you're looking at the law aspect of it, you'll be pressing charges, bringing up a lot of...
But it was his doing on wanting to go over there and do what he wanted to do, or what he thought that he should do. And he went, but it ended, negatively, ended bad. And I don't know. In the first place, you should just let them alone and convert other people that don't want to be converted.
They didn't want to be converted, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, they couldn't speak their language either. That was his problem. So who's at fault? Whose fault is it?
The white dudes.
The white guys. Just kidding.
I don't think we're dealing with any white people here. He was Asian. But he was American. I'm pretty sure he was American. But he was
Asian American though.
he was Asian American. Yes, he was an Asian American. So he wasn't a white guy.
There's probably some traces of Caucasian in his blood.
Which makes him an asshole? Is that what you're trying to say? Is that what I heard you say?
No.
Did anybody else hear her say that? No? Am I the only one? Okay.
You can go like this too.
I have no idea what that means. Well, that's sure enough as well. Okay, so well, I don't know. So who's the bad guy here?
So if the Navajo went over there to go convert, then,
To Navajo traditionalism?
or you're not supposed to do that, but what if the Navajo Christian missionary went over there? I wonder how people would react.
Would you guys be pissed? Would you be ready to go over there and start a war with the 24 people that live on that island? I think you could beat them. There's 300,000 of you guys, and there's only 24 of them, so.
I think Navajo Christians are perceived differently than Navajo.
Okay.
Because they think differently than other Navajos who are
Okay.
into the church.
Okay.
And some of them are like hardcore church people where they preach basically to everybody.
Proselyte.
But when we used to get missionary letters from people who were in Honduras or
Right.
other places, they would share their experiences like, oh, it's dangerous out here, sometimes we don't eat, we hear gunshots every now and then, it's very violent, but we're still here.
Why?
This is my purpose in being here, this is my calling. So, in a way, they do accept what could happen.
Sure.
They already state that, oh, if something bad happens, I did it because of the glory of God. This is my calling. So
Okay.
they accept it already if something happens. I don't know, in this case, the missionary did that as well, but most of them, when we used to get missionary letters from all over the world, this is, they would indicate.
So who's wrong in this case? If we're gonna charge somebody with something, who should we charge?
Church.
Have the
boat.
church been going over there like constantly,
The boat
continuously?
company.
He has. Evidently, this isn't the first time he's gone over there.
Was it him himself that had a conviction that he wanted to go over there, or was it the church sending him that way?
I think it was him, I think, from what I understand. But would the church admit it?
No.
Well, churches are supposed to be truthful. Okay, so who are we going to charge? We're going to charge the people that did the murdering, or are we going to... Well, what else can we charge people? We could charge him with breaking the law, because he did break the law.
Mhm.
They told him not to go, and he went there over and over again. And finally they got tired of seeing it. Well, he was trying to do sign language, and who knows what, He's doing all this stuff, he's probably going, dude, far out, all right. And it probably means something really negative to them, or
Yeah.
relatively, who knows? But we can't talk to them.
But at the same time, the tribe should have just chased them off instead of killing
They did, they chased him off,
But he
he kept coming back.
Murder, still murder.
It's still murder, murder's murder, dead's dead.
Yeah.
So should we charge them with murder
How are you going to
The
charge them?
individual,
that did it?
not the whole tribe.
But it's the whole tribe's decision on killing that person, I'm sure, right?
Could have been. Probably,
Maybe.
potentially it was. Shot him with an arrow, shot him through the heart.
Dang. How far?
You've got my book.
Yeah.
Okay.
How
Archery.
far was the...
Was a shot?
Yeah.
I don't know.
in the
He was-
heart?
On the heart.
No sight? No,
No,
stabilize?
no.
No fancy?
Oh, listen, you guys used to shoot people from horseback riding at breakneck speed and you put an arrow, you know.
I'm gonna do that all summer then.
You're gonna ride the horse and shoot the arrow.
Make my own.
Anyway, so who's at fault? Who's the bad guy here?
The missionary, or I don't know.
Well, are you gonna be the prosecuting attorney or the defense attorney? Decide.
I don't know, I grew up Christian, so it's like, really, just kidding. It's a battle within myself.
Everybody else is the jury. But we have to decide who we're gonna charge first. Who should we charge?
Probably charged the missionary because he crossed boundaries
Because
in the beginning.
He broke the law.
And
Okay.
he probably broke the law within the tribe as well.
Well, let's charge him first. Let's try him first. So go ahead, prosecuting attorney. What did he do wrong?
He broke the law.
He broke the law.
Crossed territory.
That he wasn't supposed to cross over and over again.
Mhm.
Okay, and there is no defense. I guess there is no defense unless somebody wants to try to defend him. Do I have a defense attorney? Nobody?
But.
Okay, I'll do it. God told him to do it, and it's not his fault. So please don't convict my client of breaking the law, because it was a higher law that he was following.
Do you have evidence? You have evidence that God told you?
No.
Sure.
Sure, I've got a whole book full of written statements.
The Holy Bible, no.
Of course, the Holy Bible. I got it right there. Okay, so, jury, let's put the jury together. My defense is that God told him to do it, and he was just doing God's work, so he shouldn't be charged with any crime. And you're saying he did commit a crime, he broke the law. Okay, jury, so go ahead, deliberate and decide whether he's the bad guy or whether he should be convicted or not.
If he wanted to convert the tribe according to what he believed. So, but then you only do that, I mean, you can do that, but if someone doesn't want to follow Christianity, it's really their choice.
So what are you saying? Is he guilty or not guilty?
He's guilty.
He's guilty? Okay, so I got a guilty. Guilty, Sharon? Don't pretend you haven't been listening. Is he guilty of a crime? Of breaking the law? He was following God's law?
You can't force anybody to become Christian. They have their own faith.
Says the prosecuting attorney. What do you think? You get a vote. I'm coming back to you. What do you think? Guilty or not guilty?
I would say he followed a thin line, or they follow a thin line. It was like that part of where
Guilty or not guilty? Jeez.
no contest. Well, it's like that part where he goes.
There is no maybes. It's either he's guilty or he's not guilty.
I'm trying to find that thin line where it says look, but you can't touch.
Wait,
Touch,
what are you saying, guilty or not guilty?
Taste,
to?
but don't swallow.
Him breaking the law.
Oh, yeah.
He broke the law.
So he's guilty.
Yeah.
Says the prosecuting attorney. You say he's guilty. You say he's guilty. Sharon, what do you say?
Guilty.
He's guilty. Okay. And you say?
Yeah, you know.
Yes, I want my case. Where's my money? Where's my eggs?
I would say guilty.
Guilty. Okay.
Guilty.
Guilty. Arlene, is he guilty?
Guilty.
See, you're going to hang this jury if you're not careful. It's the missionary that was killed on the island.
Oh. Yeah. Is
So-
he guilty that he crossed boundaries or not guilty because of the glory of God?
Well, it's just following his calling.
What Christianity was he? I mean, what denomination was he?
So, what do you think? Was he guilty? So we
Because
got
it's
another
written
guilty. So what do
already
we-
in law that he's not supposed to go there.
One, two, three, four, five, six. Okay.
I had a
Guilty,
lot of
you-
pretend
okay.
I tried. I
Okay, so he's
think it was
guilty.
near my
All
trial,
right,
too.
so now we have to decide whether we're going to try the person that killed him for murder.
He's not a citizen.
Obviously, it was just one arrow, shot him through the heart. Good shot.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
No.
Where can I try?
In-law
Just
material.
kidding.
Okay, so who
That's what you
thinks
call
we should
men.
try this guy for murder? I'm assuming it was one of the males.
How can they try that person as a murderer, but that person is not even, doesn't hold statehood or citizenship in that country or state?
Sounds to me like you're the prosecuting attorney. You're the defense attorney, okay.
Yeah.
Do we have a prosecuting attorney that wants to try this guy for murder? I mean, he killed somebody.
I don't want to, but.
Will
Should
you?
play devil's advocate.
So, okay. So you're the prosecuting attorney, you're going to try him for murder. Okay, go ahead and make your statement about why it's murder.
I don't know what to say. I'm trying to think of what you said. I don't know. I don't want to do it. Yeah.
You don't want to do it?
Yeah.
Because he was warned already by the boatman not to do that, not to go that way. And the guy that was taking him there turned around at a certain point and witnessed him
Being killed.
crossing the boundaries, you know, and that the tribe and the boundaries of that tribe were protected by that
Law?
state and that law. So
We've already found the guy
But where's
guilty
the hospitality
of breaking the
of
law.
tribe?
But
Just
well,
kidding.
now we're trying the guy that
is
killed
there
him.
an agency that works close with the tribe? If so, then you
No,
could, but
no,
if
no,
not, then
nobody
you
makes
can't.
contact with these people.
Then you can't then. I don't see where, unless you're gonna go and invade this people that you're not supposed to
modern-
invade in the first place.
They took 6 teenagers off that island. They took 6
Since that
teenagers
happened,
off that island.
or
When they
before?
first discovered them, they took six teenagers off the island. They returned 4 to the island,
Mhm.
and two would not go back.
So the 4 that are there, do they still have contact with the outside
No,
world? Or
No,
are they fully
no,
kicked
but the
out?
problem is that they had no immunity. And so when they
So
sent
that's
those
why
4 back,
They got everyone else
they
sick,
decimated the entire tribe. There used to be
clean
lots,
in their own.
and now all of a sudden there's only 24 of them.
So no, I would not press any further because that tribe was already.
So you're saying you don't want to press
No.
charges for murder? Okay. Well, I guess I'll have to do it.
Yeah, you did. Okay, I was trying to, but I just couldn't.
I know you couldn't do it. Okay.
Because we're indigenous, we can't.
I know when I
Okay.
first heard, I go,
So here we are. Here we are. We just convicted the missionary for breaking the law. So we have to follow all the laws. We just can't follow the ones that we select to follow. We have to follow all the laws. And this man murdered another individual in cold blood. He killed him, and he knew he was killing him when he shot him. I mean, he didn't miss wounding him and killing him by mistake. He killed him because he wanted to kill him. It's Indian law, not American Indian, but Asian Indian law, that when one person murders another one, they have to be convicted. They have to be tried, and if they are found guilty, then they have to be convicted of murder. And then we will do whatever you decide, jury, we'll decide what to do. Okay, so are you done with your defense? Go ahead, defend him some more.
No, just.
Well,
Even though I'm supposed to be able to talk twice, and you're only supposed to talk once. Go ahead, talk a second time.
Sure. No, because I think he acted in self-defense of his own person and for the safety of his people. Because they know this about themselves, because they know from the previous experience of the 16 teenagers being taken and 4 only being returned, and those 4 almost decimating the entire population
Of the island.
of the island. So I would think that that guy was acting in self-defense, not only of his own person, but of his home, his territory, and for whatever is left of them.
You know as well as I do that self-defense is not a defense you can use in a court of law in India. Okay.
But no,
Okay.
he did not do wrong. I don't
He-
think.
okay. Well, that's, okay. So we'll let the jury decide.
Okay.
Okay,
Now let the jury decide.
okay. So guilty or not guilty? Guilty of murder or not guilty? Not guilty? Guilty. Guilty.
Not.
Not. So we're 2-2,
Not guilty.
not guilty. We're 3-2. Guilty, not guilty of murder.
Guilty.
Guilty. Guilty.
So it's going to jail.
He's going to jail.
Take the narrow way.
Okay.
To sentence a whole tribe to death. I hope you guys are all happy.
Now they have to go find him. Now they have to go,
If they can
I
find
know
and
if they can
identify
find
him.
him. So what are we talking about? We're talking about pretrial publicity, and of course, we've been talking about a specific situation. And I hate to get you guys involved in all this stuff, but this may come up again and again and again. Actually, it happened to you guys back in whenever. I know that we can talk about the Spanish, we can talk about the Americans, and we can talk about the crazy Presbyterians that came
Talk
here,
about the
tried to
Comanches.
convert you guys to. We can talk about the Native American church that tried to convert you guys to Comancheism or whatever. Anyway,
Chill.
I'm just It's your church, I don't care what it is. Specific
You're-
pretrial
you sound-
publicity.
You sound too indigenous.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, Wilson and I are like, we're buddies now, so. You were there when we were having our conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were all there when you guys became best friends.
Oh, yeah.
Full
BFFs.
witness.
Specific pretrial publicity, case-specific information made available prior to the trial can affect the sentiments of the jurors in the trial. And this is the problem. And this is one of the reasons why we don't know what's going to happen in Albuquerque. Can they try that case in Albuquerque? Do they have to move it someplace? Where can they possibly move it where people don't know about the murder of the little 10-year-old girl and the boyfriend and the mom, doing whatever the mom did, and the aunt coming in and she's part of the murder and the whole mess. So who doesn't know about that in New Mexico? Where can we possibly try that case? Okay, of course, right now it's in Albuquerque. You're gonna move it, you can't move it to Arizona.
No, Magdalena's in New Mexico. You can move it to Truth or Consequence.
Well, they could probably move it to Carlsbad or Tucumcari. I don't know where Tucumcari gets their news. I don't know if they get it from,
I don't think they don't get.
they could get Amarillo.
They
It's not
could-
that far.
That's what I was saying, maybe more central New Mexico, where a lot of the news doesn't get coverage, like the South Central area, the smaller towns, but then again, it's like, what kind of court do we have in those other towns that will actually
Exactly.
house, that is fixed to house that kind of case?
We'll keep talking about this case. Jurors can also be influenced by generic prejudice arising from media coverage of issues not specifically related to a particular case, but thematically relevant to the issues at hand, such as deviant sexual behavior. Seems like the issue always comes back to something that has to do with sex. So what is deviant sexual behavior? What is not normal sexual behavior?
Things that are not under normal social and civil.
Yeah, but
Kind of
what norms are you
acceptability.
going to use? Are we talking, how are we going to figure out what is pornography and what isn't pornography? Is nudity pornography?
It's art.
Is it pornography?
It
Yes.
depends on the person looking at it.
Mobile display, I don't know what it's called.
When I was young, I used to read National Geographic. National Geographic had a lot of people without any clothes. Well, they were talking about a lot of people. Was that pornography? They were talking about a lot of different cultures around the world, and some people don't wear as many clothes as we do in the United States. Was that pornography? Was I reading pornography?
혹시 어떻게서 Sorry, I can only explain it in Navajo.
Okay.
If your mind is already geared in that direction to think that is pornography, then it doesn't matter if what you see is pornography or not, you'll think of it that way. But if your mindset isn't in that sense of thinking, then you will only see a person and you will only see the reality of what you're looking at instead of trying to make up a fantasy of something that will pleasure you or whatever your brain
My
is.
argument with Wilson yesterday.
Maybe.
Wilson talks about the perfect world.
All the time.
All the
A little
time.
too much.
Well, and that's okay, because he's using that as the example that you should
Go
live
by.
by. You should live by, this is what would happen if this were a perfect world. But, of course, the world is not perfect. And
But it's integrated with his own belief. And norms.
he wants you to be perfect, but because you grew up the way that you grew up, then you can't be perfect. This is,
Like
this,
Christianity thinking.
well, I don't want to even use Christianity as an example. No, the problem is, I mean, so your grandmother told you what your grandmother told you, and maybe your grandmother told you differently than what Wilson's talking about.
Mhm.
So which one does that, who's right, your grandmother or Wilson?
It's up to you to decipher.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But his perfection is not going to be your perfection, because your perfection has to do with what your grandmother told you. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. And it's not always the same.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. And
Mm-mm.
we-
Me and my grandmother lived totally different lives.
Exactly, exactly. So when we talk about deviant sexual behavior, what is deviant sexual behavior? Once upon a time, if you performed a sex act that was not genital sex, it was considered deviant. Okay. Now, there are still organizations in the United States military, for example, that will charge you with sodomy. Sodomy means having sex that is not genital sex. It can be any other kind of sex. It can be anything else. So if they catch you doing something that you're not supposed to be doing, or having sex with somebody you're not supposed to have sex with, committing adultery, or if you're having sex, if you're not married to the person that you're having sex with, and neither of you are married,
That's still adultery.
it's still, well, it's not adultery, it's fornication.
Oh, wait, yeah.
And they'll charge you with fornication, as strange as that may seem. So we've got this Puritan organization out here that is the least Puritan people in the whole wide world, yet they've got all of these laws, the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and they actually charge people with this stuff. And the reason they do it is so that they can plea bargain, as odd as that may seem. So when my wife and I were in the service, sometimes they caught people having sex with somebody that they weren't supposed to have sex with. Somebody was married and they were having sex with somebody else. So what did they charge them with? Well, they charged them, if it was rape, and that's neither here nor there, but they usually charged them with sodomy, they charged them with adultery, they charged them with, well, that's about it. But they just threw all this stuff in there because... Are they Puritans? No, they're not Puritans. These guys are military people, and they understand all of this stuff. But they charged them with all of these crimes because they could. So if they were having sex and it wasn't genital sex, then they charged them with sodomy, as odd as that may seem. Or if they admitted that they'd had sex in a way that wasn't genital sex, then they charged them with sodomy, as strange as that may seem. Sodomy is still on the books in select places in the United States.
I think it is here too.
That's what they used to charge homosexuals with. They caught them having homosexual sex, and they charged them with sodomy. And they could throw them in jail for, 1 to 5.
I know there was an instance of a football team from Winslow back in the late 90s that I guess hazed one of their rookie team members and then coming up from
Right.
JV going into varsity, and they hazed this child and they actually molested him with a marker,
Right.
and those kids were actually charged with sodomy
Yeah.
and sexual harassment.
Well, it is sodomy.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's sodomy with an instrument.
yeah,
rather
that's
than-
what they got charged with, and all those kids, like, for a while, their like Winslow didn't finish out the football season because of that.
Because
Yeah. And they were pretty pissed off because they had to lose to P1
Go opinion.
Go Opinion.
we won because they didn't have a football team. Hot damn. It only gave me one all year. All
Hallmark
right.
is very rival against Winslow, so that's why I'm like, if Winslow's playing against somebody, I always go for another team. It's always been like that. When I was the mascot, we used to have dance off against the Bulldogs.
Mm-hmm.
So
You'd
I
have a
had-
dance off?
With the mascot. So I was the mascot.
The
big
cheerleaders
blue-
used to go at each other too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
So,
I'm sorry, so what was your
I was
what
a big blue roadrunner.
a blue, you were the Blue Roadrunners?
Yeah, no, it was a
We're
roadrunner.
the Roadrunners.
Yeah, see?
Oh, okay,
Roadrunners.
okay.
Yeah.
We get to
Yeah,
rivals.
I used to live in Winslow, and she's-
I don't mean to be ignorant, I just didn't.
No, it's
Okay.
okay. You're not from around here.
I am not from around here, okay.
So like, I was a mascot for all 4 years. No one didn't know until my senior night. Yeah, it was really interesting. I used to do a lot. Like, I used to do splits. I used to do all the jumps that the cheerleaders did.
Sure.
I practiced with them.
Did you have to fight with the bulldog? You
No,
just
it
danced,
was
you had to
dance
dance
style,
off,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Were you a better dancer than the bulldog was? No?
No, the bulldog was skinny and it was able to do like spins and I don't know.
She's
Mine
like,
was
I had a tail.
Yeah, I had a tail. It was plump and.
She was like, I was a roadrunner, man.
Roadrunners can't dance.
But I was like, I used to run up the bleachers, sit by people during football season, and I used to like kind of be annoying and sit by them and block them, and the people would be taking pictures, and I miss it. But one time I did the wave, and I was all running in my suit, and then next thing I was all, ooh, the whole, what's it called?
The stadium.
Yeah, it was just shaking. Everybody's just like, oh. And I got back up and I did it again, so, yeah.
This is all important
Nice.
stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
That's it.
Funny.
Anyway, okay, so deviant sexual behavior is one of the generic prejudice. So anything that has to do with sex, a lot of times people will have a specific prejudice against that. And this is one of the reasons why they used to convict homosexuals of sodomy, because there was a generic prejudice against individuals that had unnatural sex acts. It's an abomination. I mean, the whole Christian thing, you can talk about that. Anyway, generic prejudice may be more problematic than specific pretrial publicity. And the reason that generic prejudice is such a negative thing is because if people don't like a certain thing, a lot of times they don't realize they don't like a certain thing. This may be one of the reasons why in the South, if you're African American and you commit a crime or are accused of a crime, a lot of times you are convicted of that crime. Not because you're guilty, but because you are black. And there is a generic prejudice against people that are black. Last night they had a special election in Mississippi, and I think the Republican won, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. It was very controversial. There was a question as to whether she could possibly win because she was doing all of these white supremacist things. She was waving the rebel flag, and she was posing as a Confederate soldier, and she was saying things about hanging, public hangings, which of course are lynchings. I know she shouldn't have said it. It was kind of stupid. But that's the way she got elected. She got elected because she
Of her speech.
well, she seemed like all the other people in the area, and the other guy was black. The other guy was an African American. So, do white people in Mississippi vote for African Americans, or do they have a generic prejudice against African Americans? And the answer was, in this case, she won. So maybe they do have a generic prejudice. Field studies of the effects of naturally occurring publicity. Researchers have found that persons exposed to pretrial publicity possess more knowledge about the events in question, are more likely to have prejudged the case, and are more knowledgeable about the incriminating facts that would be inadmissible at the trial. And of course, some of the stuff they will not have at the trial. They can't have it at the trial. The judges decided that this information shouldn't be presented at trial. But of course, they have already watched, they've already listened to, they've already read about what's going on in the trial. How often do you see about a murder somewhere and you read all about it? You read everything that it says. Well, sometimes you may be reading a conservative view of what happened, and sometimes you may be reading a liberal view of what happened. We do have both types of news. So, I don't know. Remember the lady in Florida that her daughter disappeared, and then they found her. Her daughter disappeared, and she went out and had a party. Went to a party while her daughter was missing. Casey Anthony, yeah, the famous Casey Anthony case. Now, the reason I'm thinking about that is because the father just had an accident, automobile accident. He's in the hospital. Casey Anthony. Okay, so knowing that she went and partied while her daughter had disappeared and they hadn't found her yet, does that prejudice you against her? Is she an unfeeling person?
No, I don't think she's.
Or could we use the B word with her?
I think she's crazy. But I don't think she's.
How do you
No,
feel
I
about a
mean,
mother
like,
who loses their
yeah.
child and then goes out to a big party and dances the night away? I get Does that prejudice you against her? Do you think she should have been home crying her eyes out because she couldn't find her daughter? They were still
I mean,
looking.
there was, I guess, on a
She put it on
personal
Facebook.
level, yeah. I mean, she's definitely meant to do it if that's what she did afterwards. If it was nothing to her, because I would imagine any parent, even if, like, you know, God forbid anything were to happen to my kids, but if any of my kids were to go missing, I know that their biological father would show up, even though he's non-existent in their life for the past 7-8 years. You know, and he is very irresponsible, but I know he would at least be concerned to show up. So if I were to look at it from that point and think of it biasly, then yeah, shit.
She's not a good person. Then okay, because she partied while her daughter had
Because
disappeared.
even the worst of the worst person would have at least shown some sort of empathy towards
She
the
fought for those
child.
kids.
And then the empathy towards the grandparents too, especially
Right.
the grandmother.
Sure. Okay.
So there's a lot of that she's missing.
So you have a prejudice against her because
I
she.
just created one, yeah.
Because
You
she
made me
danced the
have-
night away while her
made
daughter
me
had
have me
disappeared.
You're making me be prejudiced over here, Bruce.
Okay, that's my fault.
You're the psychologist.
I know, here I'm creating all these negative situations. Strengths, they use large and representative samples of prospective jurors, and they rely on naturally occurring publicity about actual cases. We're talking about doing research with this. Weaknesses, the data are correlational in nature. So one case, you can't say that this is a murder case, therefore this case is the same as a drug case. They're not the same. It's apples and oranges. It's an apples and oranges situation. And that's part of the problem with research. Research tries to correlate information, and sometimes they shouldn't be putting those two things together.
Is that correlate?
That's correlation.
Yay!
No. Using multiple methods to assess effects of pretrial publicity, Daftery and Capur in 2009 found that regardless of whether exposure was experimentally manipulated or naturally occurring, those who had read pro-prosecution versus pro-defense articles were more familiar with the case and more likely to judge the defendants guilty prior to trial. Situation up in Montana. This happened on the reservation. One individual beat up a lady. He beat up his girlfriend, beat the crap out of her. And then the cops were called in for domestic violence. Well, there was only one cop in town, and he responded. So he started chasing this guy, and eventually he chased him all the way to the switching station, the electrical switching station. He went inside. Of course, now he's trapped, because there's only one way in, one way out. And so the policeman comes in, and the guy grabs him, and they start wrestling, and somehow the perpetrator got a hold of his gun, and the gun discharged, and the policeman was killed. Eventually they arrested him. He went to trial as a cop killer. He claimed that he didn't shoot the policeman, that the policeman was shot by another policeman who had arrived on the scene and started discharging his weapon toward him. He wounded the other policeman. He actually shot the other policeman. Shot his gun out of his hand. I know, pretty good check. With a pistol. Anyway, he shoots the guy's gun out of his hand. Of course, they've got one dead cop on the ground. They've got one wounded cop over by his police car. Eventually he gets arrested. They take him to trial. Now they've got to look at all of this evidence. Well, unfortunately the bullet that killed the other policeman was fragmented, so they couldn't do ballistics on the bullet. So they couldn't tell whose bullet it was, which gun it came from. As much fun as that is. Okay. Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. They convicted him of murder. Not only of murder, but of murder of a police officer. So they put him in jail for life. However, the family of the individual who did the shooting, or theoretically did the shooting, claims that it wasn't him that shot the police officer. It was the other police officer that shot. One police officer shot the other one. That's what they claim. Huge family. Very important family.
So it has to be somebody else and not anybody from your circle.
Yeah, it couldn't possibly be them. But it couldn't possibly be him.
How do they know that it's the police officer that killed the police officer?
Oh, it gets better.
Oh, really?
One police officer was having an affair with the other police officer's wife. You get it?
Oh.
You got it?
I never
Okay.
knew that. That's why I
Okay.
was all like, have to
Okay.
keep that a secret.
So
So it has to be someone outside the family.
So the dead police officer's wife was having sex with the other police officer. So of course this police officer shot and killed the guy that he was having sex with his wife. I know.
And then the police and their wife swapping, man. You just need to
It
stop
gets
that.
better. The woman who was having sex with both of these guys, she was my student. I had her in class. I know.
What'd you do to her, Bruce?
I didn't do anything to her. This
What were
happened.
you teaching that?
What was I teaching that woman? I know. So here I am. I'm torn between,
The
this.
victim and-
I know the victim and the murderer and.
They were thinking with the wrong.
It was. It was worse than that. I didn't say that, but it was worse than that because I played ball with one of the guys. One of the guys.
I
there
thought you
was
said
a,
you played with both of them too.
no. No, I played softball with this guy. And
His character.
so if he saw somebody from the other family, he would start screaming at them. And so here I am, we're at the softball field, and all of a sudden, and I don't know who's related to who, and all of a sudden this guy just goes off on this guy, and he starts screaming and shaking the backstop, and he's just going crazy. And he's on my team.
Oh, man.
I know, it was
You guys are
horrible.
all crazy up there.
So they wouldn't let him play. They wouldn't let him play ball against each other because they were afraid that one would hit the other with a baseball bat or they'd get into a fight. So
Maybe
if
that would have been better than the gun.
it would have been better than the gun. It was
Did
horrible.
it happen at the house? Their house?
At
Mm.
her house, I think it was.
No, it was at the switching station, the electrical switching station, where it happened.
Dang.
Yeah, I know it was
Call it
terrible.
NECA into
It's you.
So we have pro defense and we have pro prosecution. In this case, we had two people having, who knows whether they were actually having sex or not. I don't know. I wasn't there. I didn't have anything to do with it. And all of a sudden, we've got this argument going
We
on.
just play ball.
I was just a softball player, okay? And I didn't want to get involved in any of this stuff. And then she's my student. Oh my.
Man.
Not only that, not only was she my student, but the lady that got the crap beat out of her was my student as well. And it was like 2 weeks before the end of the semester. He just whaled the tar out of this lady. Both of her eyes were closed. I know, she couldn't take finals. I mean, it was horrible. I know, it was a terrible, terrible situation. She never passed the class. She never finished the class. I gave her an eye. She never came back. It was horrible. Anyway.
Darn.
Meet your husband back up.
It was so sad to be in that situation.
man.
I know.
Where was this at?
This is up at Fort Belknap. Harlem, Montana. That stuff never happens here.
Yeah. Don't go up there.
No, of course
Knock on
not.
wood, it happens here when
Yeah.
we leave. It's just surrounded by trees.
It's just like, it happens, but you just don't hear about it. But no one doesn't shoot each other.
They had a trial and they convicted this guy but no, the family won't accept any of the, so he's in jail forever and he can't be released and the family's all pissed off. I know. And the one guy who was having sex with the other guy's wife, they broke up and
Oh my god.
It wasn't even worth it at all.
and she became a MMA fighter.
Oh, nice.
I know, so she was like the Montana champion of women that beat up other women. I mean, it was really kind of weird. Anyway.
Got empowered. Yes.
Well, she just used to beat people up. Exposure occurred 8 weeks before rendered verdicts, suggesting that the effects of pretrial publicity may be long-lived. So we've looked at the research that has been done. So what can you do to remedy pretrial publicity? One of the other things that you can do is postpone the trial. And that's what has happened in Albuquerque. They postponed the trial. It was supposed to start in September, then they delayed it until November. Now they've delayed it until the beginning of next year. So we'll see what happens. The other is that you can expand voir dire. This is the most popular method. So you can get people from outside the region to be on your jury.
Just not at sentence.
Judicial instructions, unfortunately, research suggests that the three above techniques are largely ineffective. So he can tell you, don't think about that. You weren't supposed to know about any of that stuff. But of course, that doesn't work. The one that works the best is the change of venue. And that's why we're talking about where are we going to move this trial so that those three individuals get a fair trial. Guilty or not guilty? Are they guilty? The three people, the mom, the mother, the boyfriend, the aunt of the boyfriend, are they guilty?
Very much so, because there's a history of it, and it's documented with CPS.
Okay, so how in the world could you possibly be on the jury? You've already convicted all three of them. So how could you be on the jury? Do you think they're guilty too? Does anybody not think that they're guilty as sin? Nobody, huh? Okay.
I probably couldn't.
No, you
Give me
couldn't.
more.
Well, you
Okay.
made me build a bias earlier, so.
I know. I've created all these problems.
What's interesting is I don't have a TV or any kind of,
But you still know about it.
yeah, with streamings and little newspaper
Bits and
clippings,
pieces.
but not the whole story.
Yeah.
I remember we brought it up when we first had the mock sessions,
Sure.
and that's when it came out, the whole news and bits and pieces.
So you could have been on the jury if it wasn't for me. It's my fault.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
I kind of
I'm teaching you the wrong things, I guess. I'm such a villain. Do I have a 126? What time is it? 11:26?
What time do we get out?
11:50. Okay. See, I knew what time we got out. Okay. Okay, so we were all juries earlier. This is going to be fun. So let's talk about jurors and juries and
Is
how
this our last
prejudice.
lecture?
I'm sorry?
Today is our last lecture.
Yeah, this is it. We're done. Sorry, I didn't get all through all 14 chapters. Yeah, but we'll get through part of this. Approximately 2/3 of Americans have been called to jury duty, and approximately 1/4 have actually served as jurors. I've been called to jury duty, but I've never served, actually. There you go. Juries have been criticized for excessive awards of civil juries. Juries also have been defenders. Verdicts reached by representative juries can and often do increase the legitimacy of the process in the eyes of the public, particularly in controversial trials. And of course, this is coming up right now because Paul Manafort, of course, had a jury trial. They had 18 counts against him, and he was convicted of 8. So the jury was hung on 10 of the items that he was being tried for. But the fact that it was a jury has legitimized the decision against him. So of course, you know, Paul Manafort used to be he worked with Donald Trump's campaign. He was the campaign manager. Donald Trump has said he's a wonderful person. He should never have been convicted. But of course, since it's a jury trial, it's really hard for him to argue with that. Or is it? Does he still argue with it? Donald Trump? Nobody cares? Well, so what does he say about Paul Manafort? Something else happened with Paul Manafort over the last couple days.
I've been busy with like finals, so I've been able to watch news and.
So they gave him immunity. He agreed to work with the Mueller investigation, and now they've released him. They said that he's a liar. They can't get good information out of him. I know. So they were going to give him immunity for certain things, and now he doesn't have that immunity anymore. I know, it's just been over the last couple of
So they're
days.
going to keep him in the country?
Well, he's already in jail. Well, he's not really in jail, but he will be going to jail because he has 8 counts against him.
Yeah, the last thing I heard that he had sort of, I'm not saying special privileges, but several immunity where he can do
Right.
certain things
Right.
with
And that was part of the deal.
counsels.
Exactly. That was part of the deal. Remember, he tried to bribe some of the people that were witnesses against him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he tampered with witnesses. This was during the first trial, but he has a second trial. That was a civil trial. That was a Virginia trial, a state trial. Now he has a federal trial coming up, and they were giving him immunity from the federal trial, so that if he was convicted, he wouldn't get as many years in prison. Of course, he's 70 years old, so how many years can he serve in prison anyway? Now everything's up in the air again, as exciting as that is. So people are talking about a pardon, that he's going to get a pardon from Donald Trump, which should be interesting to watch. Psychologists have examined factors that affect the accuracy of jury verdicts. We have learned that evidentiary strength is probably the most important determinant of jurors' verdicts in both civil and criminal trials. So they do listen to the evidence. They try the case on the evidence. That's what we have determined. So jurors are pretty good at it, as strange as that may seem. I mean, you just pick 12 people and you assume that they are knowledgeable enough that they're going to be able to make a decision. And the truth is that that's usually what happens. Effects of extra-legal information. Jury decisions can also be influenced by extra-legal information, irrelevant information about the defendant's background, their appearance, their race. And of course, this is huge. This is huge, the whole idea of race. If you watch television, and you watch too much television, and maybe you watch that really strange television show, Cops. Okay, if you watch Cops, who's the bad guy? Who's always the bad guy? And who are always, I'm sorry?
Crackheads.
Crackheads? What race are those crackheads?
White people.
White people are the bad guys, and the cops are always black. Is that
Yeah.
correct? Is that the way it works? Okay. Or Hispanic.
Yeah.
We have a lot of Lopez's, Rodriguez, and Ramirez as our police officers.
Forget that Hernandez.
And the Hernandez's, of
Never
course.
caught the gayness.
There we go.
Lottie.
There's no leaf horn though.
Okay.
Tony,
So, sometimes it all depends on their race as to whether they're convicted or not. So if you're black and you're in the South, what's the probability you're going to be not convicted of your crime? What's the probability? It's not very high. But what if you're a good-looking white guy?
Oh, we're gonna keep letting you be white.
Yeah, we'll
Good.
let that person get away
We
with
let
murder.
Mr. Gray go on a lot of stuff, so why not
Mr. Gray, we were talking about sexual deviance. So the 50 Shades of Grey, how many deviant things did he and his significant other perform? Has anybody read the book?
I gotta watch the movie again.
In the
I don't
movie,
even
how many
want to
times
attempt the
were they
book.
doing things they shouldn't have been doing?
you? That's a little.
Were you censoring the movie while you're watching it? Oh no, they're not supposed to do that.
No,
No,
I was enjoying it.
you were enjoying
Kidding!
it.
No.
Did they do anything they shouldn't have done?
I don't remember. Kind of black.
I don't know, I can't remember. I've never seen the
I
movie.
think the only form of deviancy that I find problematic in that whole series is just how his wife, before it wasn't his wife, but she was kind of just very naive and very
Okay,
not knowledgeable in a lot of ways that he was knowledgeable.
Was-
So in a way, I think he kind of influenced what she might like and might not like.
he stole
And
her
might be
innocence.
problematic for if they ever decide to break up and she goes with someone else
She's going
and
to
doesn't get
expect.
that same expectation sexually and experience and in whatever she gets out of it, and it's not gonna be met if they decide to leave each other and go for someone else.
But isn't that the way it is with any?
Any
to any
relationship,
relationship?
no matter how mild or wild that whole part of their relationship is. So I think he really did a disservice to her in not letting her be her own person at first and then introducing that to her. That could have been different.
Was there any pain involved in any of
That
their?
seems to be what it revolves around, is pain. Like giving out that pain or receiving that.
I think he liked giving pain to have a sexual response.
The response, yeah, that's the only time he has a response. Is if
Not physically beating, but it was more of
like
Let's-
what your first wife wanted you to do.
Oh, she went on
yeah, exactly.
Those expectations.
Ah, okay. Oh, now I understand. I understand completely.
Without going into words.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I was wondering. Okay.
I don't know why I couldn't use the word spanking. Like, I can't use that word. Like,
Okay, let's use this as a teaching moment. So you've got a sadomasochistic situation.
Mm-hmm.
You've got an individual that can't have sexual pleasure unless there's pain involved.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's sadomasochism.
yeah.
But this is an individual that didn't perform. This wasn't normal for them until later on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When people use crystal meth, they use speed. They use it as, sometimes they'll use it as an aphrodisiac in the beginning, but eventually, what happens is their sexual response becomes less intense. So it takes more and more for them to respond.
Because the receptors in their brains have grown used to it.
Exactly,
It needs a little
exactly.
bit more stimulation each time.
Exactly. We're
So,
talking about
yeah.
dopamine receptors and whatnot.
Yeah.
And we're talking about excess dopamine
Mhm.
receptors because they're on speed or they're on using crystal meth. So eventually we get to the point, they get to the point where it has to be excessive sex for them to have any sexual gratification.
And also, as if Mr. Gray was our client, in his history, it talks about his history where he was a victim of that from his mom's friend.
And remember, that's what I was telling you before.
Oh.
Remember how he was introduced to that lifestyle?
Okay.
Or some other person? It was a learned behavior, like that whole problem. She used that whole Pavlov's dog.
Oh my goodness gracious, okay. So
System.
this is a
Reward and
conditioned
punishment
response.
system with him, yeah, conditioned response system.
However, we will see this in cases of if somebody is using crystal meth as an aphrodisiac.
Yeah.
And over time, they will lose their ability to respond at a lower level. So it'll take more and more and more stimulation in order for this individual. And usually it's a sadistic stimulation.
Yeah, see, so with the whole series that everyone is into with that, that's kind of what I'm thinking about at the end of this whole thing. Like, they're gonna end up either, I don't know, raping each other to death or something, I don't know, but it's not gonna be pretty.
Are we
you know,
talking about-
Because I think someone is in actual harm of losing their lives, according
Sure.
to the way
You're
it's
talking about the
going.
Grey series.
Yeah, the Grey series, the way it's going right now.
Okay.
I know everyone's caught up with the whole, fantasy and the erotica and the mystery of it all.
Well, they're on the second film, right? That's as far as we've gone.
Yeah, now there's choking. There wasn't choking before, and then there's a lot more different tools that are being implemented to that were introduced to her before, but now she's the one asking for it instead of him presenting it to her. So they're messing each other up.
There's a reason why I'm telling you this, and the reason is because if you see a situation that's very similar to this, you may be either dealing with a sadomasochistic situation, or you may be dealing with crystal meth.
And then it gets even, I think about it even more like if it were to be a real life situation to where with the amount of, sex that they're having, they're also running the risk of getting pregnant. And when they do get pregnant, how are they going to raise this child in this kind of atmosphere? How are they going to mold this kid? Are they just going to keep that door locked? And then, how kids are, that door's always locked, so that's the one place they're always wanting to look and see.
Right.
So,
Wow.
I don't know. It's just, I don't know.
Nor do I.
I think about that whole series a different way than I guess a lot of women are thinking about it.
However,
I should just shut up and enjoy it, but I'm not.
so what I'm telling you is if you see this in any of your clients, assuming you become counselors, you see this situation, you're either dealing with a sadomasochistic situation, which is not as likely as crystal meth
Do you
or
just
speed
let them
or amphetamine.
have that fetish or let them
Well,
do that?
there's a
Up
danger
a
to
point.
it. There's a
Up to
danger to
point.
it. I mean, they're coming in for a reason.
In a way, how would you help that person manage it?
Well, it all depends on whether they want it or whether they don't want it. If this is the reason they're coming in, because they're not able to respond to sexual stimulation anymore because of their drugs, then we need to clean them up.
I think the lady that introduced it to him, I think she's a psychologist, isn't she?
Well, the one that wrote the book?
No, the one that introduced the character to that lifestyle. I think she was a psychologist, the mom's friend. So, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if he ends up in counseling, because it's, coming from a counselor's
Yeah,
perspective.
he was molested.
And then it has to go full circle back to that point in order for it to get
Well, they're going to have
fixed.
to go back to his youth in order
But
to...
he still sees her every now and then.
The psychologist.
No, the lady that
the
changed
lady
it. I'm not sure if she is a
molested
psychologist or
him.
not, but I'm thinking she might be.
So if you see this, you probably need to deal with it. And you need to deal with it as,
Before anyone else.
before
gets
anybody gets
involved.
hurt, before somebody is injured, or before they start molesting
Others.
molesting people, because, I mean, that can be stimulation.
Yeah.
These,
Yeah.
it would be very easy for this person to become a rapist, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
to force people into having sex, to, wanting to hear the screams and whatnot, and the fighting and whatnot. So there's bondages in play in
Yeah,
the gray
that's
thing. Okay,
heavily-
yeah, I figured there was. Okay, sorry.
So,
He's all like, don't think about it.
Oh, jeez. Oh, how much time do I have? Okay. Why are juries' decisions influenced by irrelevant information? Calvin and Zeisel in 1966 Liberation Hypothesis. When the evidence in a case clearly favors one side, juries will decide in favor of that. In this case, in favor of that side, the one where all the evidence is aiming in that direction. But when the evidence is ambiguous, jurors are liberated and allowed to rely on their assumptions, sentiments, and biases. This is known as extra-legal evidence in reaching a verdict. Now, the president just tweeted about this. He said yesterday that a lot of times over Thanksgiving, they came out with a report, 1,600-page report from 300 different scientists who work for the federal government, and they decided that there was global warming and that we needed to do something. And if we didn't do something, then it's going to cause a lot of problems. Donald Trump doesn't believe it. He doesn't like it, even though those were his scientists. That was part of his administration. He doesn't like it, and he said yesterday that he follows his gut. And his gut is a lot smarter than most people's brains. Well, you think I'm kidding. He said, that's exactly what he said. His gut is better. And that's what we're talking about here. So if the evidence doesn't point in a specific direction, how are you going to decide whether somebody's guilty or not guilty? Well, it's going to be your assumptions, your sentiments, and your biases are going to come into play. And that's exactly what he's talking about. He's talking about his gut. He's talking about his assumptions, his sentiments, and his biases.
what if you have stomach ache? Or maybe even
I don't know. Well, that's a good point. He eats a lot of ice cream. I don't know if that has anything to do with anything.
He's like Tim Jumbo, he doesn't have a
It doesn't.
So there's good culture in the gut, there's bad culture in the gut.
Well, I don't think he knows the difference between the two.
Okay, so there are people that actually go with their gut, and of course, you're going to have to do that if the evidence isn't pointing in a specific direction. You're going to have to use something. Your brain power. In his case, of course, he uses his gut, and that's why he does some of the things that he does. That's why he says some of the things that he says, and that's why he doesn't believe in global warming. He thinks global warming. And now the Republicans are starting to talk about how much money people are making by saying that global warming exists. All these scientists are making millions and millions of dollars off of this, which is kind of interesting.
I have a gut feeling that you're dealing with depression.
Who, me?
Yeah.
I'm depressed over Donald Trump being president. One can understand jurors' attention to extra-legal information by applying cognitive experiential self-theory. When jurors deliberately focus on evidence provided during a trial, they are relying on rationally based system of information processing. That is likely to occur when the evidence is unambiguous and comprehensible. So sometimes, if you understand this stuff, they present evidence and you understand exactly what's going on. And that's what happened with my brother. My brother was he was a juror, he was actually the jury foreman. They were giving him information, he's a combat veteran, so he understood all this stuff. And the other people are going, I don't know, I've never seen anybody attack anybody else. Of course, he's been in hand-to-hand combat, it's worse than that. My brother was, he ambushed people with a knife.
He likes to get up close and personal.
He got up close and personal, so he was also a tunnel rat, which is the most god-awful thing you can possibly do. You're crawling around in the dark, you've got a flashlight, but you don't turn it on because then those guys know where you are. So you don't turn on your flashlight, and here he is crawling around in that pitch dark. and looking for the lights of the other guys, the bad guys. And of course, those of you who have claustrophobia, the Vietnamese are skinny-shouldered, little bitty, short little fellas, and so he's crawling around in a tunnel this wide. These guys' shoulders cocked sideways so that he can get through. Oh, can you imagine? So he knows this stuff, and he's had hand-to-hand combat with innumerable people, and of course that's what the case was all about. It was this lady and this man having a fight, and her pulling a knife on him, and then she got his gun, or she got a gun and started shooting him. He took the gun away from
I
her.
was gonna say instinct probably took over then because it was
He
high adrenaline.
he assumed that
stuff.
that wasn't what happened. It was this guy trying to protect himself from this woman, because he had all these defensive wounds
Uh-huh.
on his forearms, on the underside of his forearms, trying to fight her off.
Hmm.
He was stabbed in the gut. He'd been stabbed in the stomach by this lady. He had taken the knife away from her. This is the same thing that I did. I took the knife away from my wife, and I like threw it down. Well, what am I doing? Giving her an opportunity to go back and get it,
Die for it.
which eventually she did. And she stabbed me a second. Oh, God, I'm so stupid. But when the evidence is contradictory or confusing, jurors may be more likely to rely on experientially based system and extra legal information, how they feel as far as all of these things are concerned, which is really kind of interesting. The influence of prior record evidence. Once jurors have heard evidence about a defendant's prior criminal record, they may be prejudiced by it and judged the current offense in light of those past misdeeds. And of course, this is a problem. This is also a problem for counselors. If you've ever had a problem with a select thing, then I can promise you the first case you get, the first client you have, will have exactly the same problem that you did. I can promise you, it's going to come up. It's going to come up somewhere. So you have to deal with all your problems, whatever those problems are. You've got to talk about them. You've got to deal with them. Because if you don't, then they're going to come back and repeat on you. And not only that, but when you are counseling a client, you're going to not be counseling them, you're going to be counseling yourself through them. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not a counselor. I had a wife that left me. She stabbed me 3 times. She left her children. Why would she do that? So if I came across a woman who had left her children and attacked her husband, would I be treating her? No, I'd be treating my ex-wife and myself. I wouldn't be able to separate myself from that case. How come?
Yeah.
Because
It's like
I got
it's a
into
dumb
psychology
question.
to figure out what the hell's wrong with my ex-wife. And now I haven't figured it out yet. I think I have. So the prosecution is often not permitted to introduce any evidence that, of course, from their past. And this is one of the reasons why the judge gets to decide what information is available. But if the defendant opts to testify, then the prosecutors may be able to question them about certain types of prior criminal involvement in order to impeach their credibility as witnesses. So usually if you've committed 3 crimes, you went to jail for burglary, and you're being tried for stealing a car, they can't say, well, he already was tried, he was already convicted of being a thief. They can't say that. They can't even mention it. However, if you go on, and this is one of the reasons why defendants often do not get on the stand, is because they don't testify for themselves. The reason is because all bets are off. They can talk about anything in the world with that select individual, and of course all of their past crimes are going to come up, whereas the judge has blocked that. So if they don't testify, then this will never come out. If the defendant takes the witness stand, the judge may issue a limiting instruction. Evidence of a defendant's prior record can be used to gauge the defendant's credibility, but not to prove the defendant's propensity to commit the charged offense. Now this is a problem because we're talking about jurors. And the judge can say anything they want. Don't think about what that guy just said. Forget about what that guy just said. Well, how can you forget about it? If I tell you to forget about the blue hippopotamus, don't think about blue hippopotami, okay? Then what's going to be going through your brain? The blue hippopotamus, yeah, of course. Of course it is. So the judge can't really say, don't think about that. Don't use this in your deliberations. Limiting instructions are rarely effective. Juries apparently rely on their knowledge of the prior record to convict defendants when their evidence in the case against them was weak. So despite the fact, and if you've ever seen 12 Angry Men, which is a great movie, 12 Angry Men, they're trying to convict a Filipino, no, he's Puerto Rican, a Puerto Rican with a switchblade, who somebody saw from far away. They saw him coming out of a building, or somebody that looked like him. And when they found him, he had a switchblade, and the person was stabbed to death by a switchblade, or was stabbed with a switchblade. Really kind of an interesting movie, because the evidence is mostly circumstantial. And the question is, will they convict the kid on circumstantial evidence? And of course, Henry Fonda's in the movie, and he acts as the hero in the movie, and he eventually he gets the kid off. And the reason he gets the kid off is because none of the evidence is definite. So if you ever have the opportunity to watch 12 Angry Men, okay, go ahead and watch it. It's really good. Henry Fonda is really good in the movie. Does anybody in here not watch black and white movies? My daughter won't watch black and white movies. There's something wrong with her. I hate watching black and white movies. I can't tell whether her dress was red or whether it was green. It's stupid. Is it time? Yeah, it's time. Okay. Thank you. I had a good time in this class. This is a tough one for me because, yeah, I know. So congratulations on taking